Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive in CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Chris Pearson, the Director of Salesforce Development at Jostens. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So Chris, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your Salesforce journey to date, Chris? Just how you got started, where and when, and just kind of what you're up to currently.
So I got started over a decade ago. I was working at a high-tech company. I was just your traditional application business analyst. I worked with various custom apps and had gotten a new role in supporting the marketing and sales organization. And the company had just acquired another company, and they had Salesforce and we had Salesforce. So we needed to do an org merge. So I'm proud to say that I completely screwed up that project by messing up every single possible thing from a business analyst who has no idea how Salesforce works. And from there, that was my sign that I need to figure this thing out, because I started to read the writing on the wall that the SaaS apps and being able to configure changes without having to wait a day or so for a developer to make changes was likely the future. And so kind of hitched my horse to that, started to build my knowledge from there, working on different Salesforce projects. Was lucky enough to graduate into a platform director role several years later, working in the financial services organization, helped do some greenfield Salesforce org implementations. That company got acquired by another large global organization, which gave me exposure to a really massive project of combining the two entities. So that was almost a $2 billion merger that I was able to participate in. Probably the largest project to date in my career. And for the last almost 5 years now, I've been at Jostens running multiple sales clouds for their organization. Salesforce clouds, excuse me.
Perfect. The merger project, I think, it's fair to say a household name as well. Do you want to share a little bit more about that one, Chris?
Yeah, sure. I was working at a company called HFF, which was a nationwide commercial real estate firm. They focused on the buying and selling of real estate, as well as the lending and the borrowing. So kind of both sides of that transaction. Was able to grow that organization, had a ton of fun in that organization. And then JLL. JLL is probably the number 2 largest commercial real estate organization. Was acquired the company, and then we spent about a year, 9 months to a year, integrating the two organizations.
Fantastic. In terms of size, so you mentioned it was a $2 billion acquisition, but just in terms of Salesforce users, how big does that translate between the two orgs, the company being acquired and then merging into JLL?
Yeah, it was. We had probably 600 or 700 different Salesforce users, but we also had a homegrown custom app that was completely integrated into Salesforce, and that app had been around for decades, as plural. So there was over 20 or 30 years worth of data that we also needed to migrate. So we had our Salesforce features, we had the custom app itself and all of its bespoke features, and then we had all of the data as well. So that was kind of that sort of three-headed hydra was a complex beast to slay.
Good. So you mentioned in the rapid round your management career has spanned about 8 years of that decade or so in Salesforce. So I guess your team size at JLL, roughly, what was that?
That was a smaller organization. I had both the Salesforce team. I had GIS. That's a very sophisticated mapping software called Esri. So we had that, and then we also had the entire team that managed that custom app, which included developers, business analysts, support analysts, an application manager. So in totality, that was probably about a team of between 12 and 15, which is very much roughly the same size of my current organization. We kind of fluctuate depending on the amount of projects that we're running.
Perfect. So Jostens, just for our listeners who might not be aware of exactly what they do, what's their kind of Google version, one sentence, answer of what they do?
Sure. It's the memorabilia that preserves the memories that you've had with your experiences, primarily in school. So if you think about that, that's like, what are the experiences from school? Graduating, so like all of the graduation gear, the announcements, the caps and gowns, the yearbooks themselves, the championship rings, or the varsity letter jackets. And all of that, since we're a manufacturing organization, can scale and does scale both to the college level and then even the professional sports level. So like all of outside of the Jostens conference rooms, you can see all the Super Bowl rings that they've produced are in a nice lucite case outside each conference room. And we also do just various other products kind of that are tangential to that.
Perfect. So Jostens, you're Director of Salesforce Development, about 2,000 users on the platform, Sales Service Marketing Cloud, CPQ, anything else that kind of goes into that tech stack?
MuleSoft, our integration platform. Outside of that, I would say that we've got some kind of more B products on the Salesforce side, like Salesforce Maps. Not a lot of custom development goes on in that, but we do have that and the territory management functionality for that product. Outside of that, I think that's about it.
Okay, so when you joined Jostens, what was your, I guess, direct report team size, Chris?
Team size was roughly the same.
Okay.
I was coming on to it was an interesting year. It was like right in the heart of COVID. So I think I started in like December of 2020. And the organization was going through a large transformation effort on the CPQ side, really wanting to deliver the billing side of Quote-to-Cash.
Okay, so in order to go from, you've stayed kind of consistent with team size, right? But we know there's been a lot of hires that have been made, and some lasted longer than others, and so on. But you kind of got to a point now where the DNA of what a successful hire looks like, both for your teams, but also for the business as well, right? So just share with us some general experiences of the last 4 years and the times you've had to hire for what type of skill sets, what's been your overall kind of perspective on the candidates that you're seeing, the quality, the tenure, the experience levels, and so on.
Well, it's been in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, the market has been it's been a roller coaster. I think if I was to go back to maybe 2021 or 2022, when I was really focused on building the team, that was the time of zero interest rates. It was an insanely competitive time to get people to apply, to get people interested. Not only during that time, I also had to maintain the existing team. Everyone was, you could sneeze and get an offer for 5, 10, 20K more. Everyone was hiring Salesforce talent at that time. And here we are, fast forward to 2025, and it's a much, much different market. We had just recently sourced a principal admin. That's kind of like the most senior role on the team. Someone who's got at least 6 to 7 years of platform experience, who has got demonstrated experience mentoring like other admins and being able to work with other admins and kind of not only assess a little bit of their work quality, but then level them up. And we had over 400 applicants, 400 plus candidates apply for that role. And that was in a very short time period. So, the competition out there is highly elevated for these technology roles. Way different than the story it was in 2022.
So obviously to get through 400 candidates, assuming you even look at all of them, you must have some kind of process in place, use an ATS system, or so. Yeah, how do you go about doing a search? And let's say in both situations, right? One where talent is scarce, and one when there's an abundance of talent, you like adjust your process. So give
Oh,
us your overall
that's good.
approach, and then kind of go ahead.
Yeah, I think my approach has evolved. I think that the Chris Pearson of like a couple of years ago would have probably said like, that's HR's job to kind of like get people interested or screened or whatever for the role. And I felt like that that strategy may have worked then, but I don't think it achieves the success that it does now. What helped me and the tactics I used for this go around was using social media to advertise. That just gets you an influx of candidates. But I was really particular about, you've got the job description, and that's kind of the job description is out there for anybody to see, and it's a very kind of standard boilerplate. But then you've got the hiring manager's perspective, and I think that Salesforce professionals need to really think about who the consumer is of their resume. Because I think you only have two choices. You're either going to have someone who's not familiar at all with Salesforce, and if your resume is a list of all of the metadata and all the features of Salesforce and just a list of tasks, the chances of them assessing and saying that you are skilled in this job market, I think, are pretty slim. And I say that because every single resume has that. Like in my experience, like more than half of them are listing out the same set of tasks and duties and keywords. But for those that want to stand apart, you're actually treating the resume not as just a list of duties, or worse, the list of the setup nodes that you went to and clicked buttons. I mean, I've literally seen people be like, org-wide defaults, custom tabs. Like if managing report folders is a bullet point on your resume, I'm telling you now, listener, please go get your resume and remove that. Stop listening to the podcast, make that correction, and then come back to us. All right. But it's the resumes that describe things in an impact. They actually, it was actually a human, whether or not that human even knew how to spell Salesforce, could understand it. You achieved what? Like, is it a percentage? Is it a dollar value? Was it cost savings? Is it time savings? And it's kind of so that what? And so looking for those kinds of impact statements was the key to whittling that 400 resumes down to a much more manageable dozen or so. From there, we definitely had, Dave, like you said, an ATS. Like an ATS is literally just a database that lets you do some profiling, filtering. Think about if you've ever built a Salesforce list view, it's like I want and or and this and all of those kinds of criteria. But at the end of the day, it's literally just picking out keywords, and it's trying to parse it from resumes that may or may not look the same. So it's kind of hit or miss. So really, to me, I encourage people to reach out to the hiring manager. I had many people reach out. I had many people reach out and just tell me that they were interested or that they applied. And that's kind of like, all right, great, you get the thumbs up from me, but you don't get anything else, because I didn't really understand what kind of response you're looking for when you just tell me you applied, because the system tracks that. But the people who told me they applied, or that they aligned to all of the things that I was looking for. They do stuff with DevOps. They love mentoring other individuals, and here's how they've done that. Or they've got a passion for learning AI, and not just the agent force, but actually literally like, how does AI work and how do I exploit it for myself? Like, those are the types of things that got me really excited to talk to people.
Yeah, real cool. So I've done a lot of resume work, believe it or not. I used to be a part of the Salesforce mentorship program as a mentor. And I was actually invited on their they did like a webinar on resume writing. So I was invited on there to kind of, I guess, help out with some of the advice and stuff. So one of the things that I always tell people that I'm helping with their resume is, one of the biggest mistakes you can do is not realize that your resume is nothing really more than marketing collateral. Like, it is a marketing document, and it needs to be written that way. Um, and it's exactly like you said, right? You really want it to showcase some level of personality, some passion, but also who you are as a person, as well as your expertise, and not just like a menu of you know things that let's say. Maybe that's partly because of the way ATS systems work, that people are trying to game the ATS and not necessarily worry about the long game. So that being said, I personally feel, and maybe unfairly, that people get interviews more so because they're better at marketing themselves than necessarily the raw talent or how well of a team contributor they are. Um, do you ever run into that you're finding people who are really good at marketing themselves, but just aren't that good at the job?
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, that's they're usually, you can sniff some of that out when with some insightful questions. But the way that I would describe that scenario, like the younger generation would say, "Oh, they're great on paper, or they check a lot of boxes." Shout out to the Gen Z listeners out there who use those phrases. But in my experience hiring people, there's been tons of people that are great on paper, but then when it's in person, or when it comes to problem solving or collaboration or simply showing up, they fail, or they're not as strong at that. And so that takes it. I don't know if there's one single way that you can tease that out, but for those individuals, if you're looking for words of advice to those individuals, to me, sometimes it's like it's having a strong network. There were people, Maz, that I reached out to that I had no idea who these people were, but these were trusted individuals in my trusted network. Told me that these people were badasses, or they're great, or they're my go-to person. They always deliver. And so I did sometimes cold outreach and was like, "Hey, I'm posting for this role. So and so recommended you. Would love to chat with you." And sometimes I got told I'm good. Other times sometimes it would actually turn into a great conversation.
Good. So just to go back to, you put this advert out, you get 400 responses in what, a week, maybe less?
Right.
Yeah. And then the piece around, actively encouraging candidates to reach out and say, hey, they've applied or whatever, but the difference in approach, having a different way of resonating with you depending on what they say, right? So instead of just saying, hey, I applied, cool story, like, I'll get the notification, use it as a second opportunity to make your case, I guess, is what you were alluding to. So I'm curious, how many people of those 400 people, which then whittled down, maybe you had 50 people reach out directly, or 25, whatever, but what percentage used a video, if any?
Use video. I don't think any of them used video. I may have gotten some screenshots of some orgs from some very hungry trailblazers that are very early on in their journey, which I appreciate. I was like, all right, great, tell me about it. I do want to ask more questions on that, but it was mostly just like messaging, kind of text messaging, that kind of thing.
So no one used video. How many people picked up the phone and called you directly?
Oh, I think only third parties did that. I don't think I got any phone calls. Yeah.
Okay. How many people left you a voice note versus text?
I don't think I got any. I got some. I guess all of the channels I got was LinkedIn mails. I got unauthorized recruiters calling my phone and leaving me voicemails at all times of the day and night, and then LinkedIn DMs, and a couple made it to my like work email, which is not even out there listed and is a little bit obscure. So I was kind of like, I was a little bit surprised to get that.
Yeah, the reason I ask, I think, look, there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn, and it's a topic that I've spoken about often and seen posts about and contributed to posts around, like the hidden job market, right? I would estimate only about 25% of the Salesforce jobs out there are actually advertised by companies. Some of it is that they don't have the internal ATS, the HR teams, right, to go out and manage the amount of volume of applicants. Other times it's, you still got the team to run, and you've got projects that still need to be implemented. Recruitments, you just simply don't have time for it, right? Sometimes the need is more urgent. You need a contractor. That's where your tried and trusted network comes in. So I think in reality, what I see is when a role makes it to be advertised, you get the 400 applicants. What are you doing to stand out, right? And you kind of touched on that a little bit. How you're trying to differentiate from the competition. Those three areas: video, picking up the phone, voice note, basics anyone can do, right? They're not difficult. Get a free account to Loom, record a quick standard demo functionality, of put a bit creative around it. Hey, Mr. Customer, this is my sandbox org. Here's XYZ that I've built. Here's a flow that I've built. Break it down, right? If someone made an effort to do that, Chris, would it be fair to say you're more likely to respond to them?
Yes, absolutely. When I can tell when things, like, to me, the effort sometimes dictates the effort and response. If you're just going to say I'm interested on a post and like I'm not even connected to you, I had people like reach out to me and like weeks after and say they were interested, and I would then, and I informed this one lady that the role was closed, and her response to me was, could I notify her the next time that we posted a role? And I thought, I was like, wow, a stranger wants me to do work for them. So it's kind of interesting what people think is expected in this in this kind of situation. But I do think that it's really hard for hiring managers to be a jerk if you outreach and you do it in a professional manner. You speak to what you think their pain is, and I think that that's the key, is trying to recognize like the perspective of the manager. Every hiring manager is hiring for a role because they have a need, like they can't do that work themselves, or the team itself cannot absorb it. And so you as a candidate simply need to position yourself as the best cure for that pain, like, and then you justify yourself why.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people will say, well, how am I supposed to find out what the pain point is if I can't get an interview, right? Again, I'd encourage thinking outside the box. If you really want a role, you'll find a way. And to give people an example, I mean, it takes 2 minutes to go on LinkedIn, type in Salesforce under Jostens, and I won't mention their names, but I can find several people straight away that work there and do Salesforce. If I can't get hold of you, if I was a candidate looking for a job, I can't get hold of you, Chris, maybe I'd reach out to one of the team. Hey, Dave Masry, see you work with Chris at Jostens. There's this position, I'm naming the position specifically I'm interested in. Any advice, insight that might help me get to the top of the list? Could I send you a virtual coffee card for a Starbucks on me just to grab 5-10 minutes of your time to brainstorm about my application? Just I think, and this is where like the whole AI piece comes in. It's super easy with like LinkedIn, easy apply to just hit easy apply and submit an application. But like, are you really applying to a job? Or are you just literally clicking a box and hoping for the best, right? I think they're two very different things. We see it often when it, even before, before we get ahead of ourselves, but when we get to an interview, right? Like, are you really doing interview prep, or are you just turning up to have a conversation on a call, right? Jobs can be secured through interview prep. And I think what you mentioned, Chris, well, you didn't mention it, but I will extend on it, is almost a sense of entitlement with job seekers, right? Like these employees, these recruiters, etc., owe them something to help their efforts, when in fact, I think I'll go to say that a lot of job seekers need to put in more effort to their job search, not quantity, but quality. Apply for fewer roles, but do it properly. And once you secure the interviews, make sure you're spending hours, doing your research, reaching out to the team. Hey, I got an interview with Chris, Dave. Can you tell me a bit about the org, right? Just basics, right? That I think would maximize the chances of success. But I don't know what you guys think about that. Obviously, I'm kind of positioned in a bit of this is what we do for a living. So, we've seen it all, right? But what are your thoughts?
I think that the front part of the job seeking part, which is like just when you're dealing with like resumes and your network and all of that, it's all about marketing yourself. And then the moment that you have a fish on the line, if we're going to use that expression, like a company that has expressed interest, then it's on you to then figure out and reverse things. And now you've got to completely understand the company's perspective. What's the pain? What are the different levers that I can see so that I can position myself as being the best person to solve those different pain points? And then it almost flips, because I can tell you how many times candidates didn't get the job with me because of the lack of how they performed in the interview. It was lack of insightful questions, lack of articulate responses, or a missing example of collaboration and things like that. And that, to me, it's like that interview is like, it's yours to lose it. So you need to then make sure that you're positioning yourself and asking questions, and not just going through your resume and your experience, but actually saying like, I've done my research, or in my experience, companies of your size and or this industry have these types of problems. How are you solving it? That type of approach demonstrates ownership. And believe me, I want a team of owners. Like I don't want a team of just of workers that just are here for an 8 to 5. But ideally, owners actually kind of have a different mindset and approach the work and design solutions that, in my experience, are frankly more scalable, better documented, and filled with less errors.
So from a job seeker perspective, I think there are two different things. One is getting the interview, and then one is how you perform past that, right? So a lot of the things, Kiro, that you're talking about, like you say that it's very obvious, but it's very time consuming. And it's not like, people, particularly good people, are sitting at home necessarily, right? They have a job, and if not, they're doing something else. Maybe they're hustling. It's a big investment, and truth be, it's a big investment in time to spend a half hour per job application when you don't even know if that job exists, truth be told. If all you have is an ad, right? So if I don't know Chris and I'm going to reach out to someone in my network who's connected to Chris and say, oh, you know, Chris, look, you keep hiring. What can you tell me about his Salesforce org? Maybe you'll get a response from them if they're feeling particularly helpful, but I very highly doubt they would actually pass your resume along, particularly if they don't know you. I wouldn't make a recommendation to someone I don't know personally. That's just me. But it's a very, I mean, people gotta like often submit hundreds of applications, at least that's claiming, right? Just to get an interview. So Chris, I'll ask you anecdotally, 400 candidates, how many of them did you talk to?
Oh, I could talk one. I can count that number on possibly one hand.
Right. So we're talking
I think,
single digit percentages.
yeah, absolutely.
Right. So like, are we going to invest a half hour? So
I mean, so I'd caveat a little bit actually, and push back on that. Right. I think it depends how much time. Here's the thing: like, it's very transactional when people go and about their job search. I lose my job, I get laid off, lose my job, my contract ended. Okay, let me open LinkedIn and start networking. Right. Oh, shock! It takes me 2-3 months to find a job. The market's tough. What people do when they're smart is they invest their time in building connections like we are, right? And networking, going to events, supporting local meetups, supporting podcasts, sharing content, updating their certs as they go along, right? The networking to put themselves in the best position possible so that when an unfortunate circumstance does happen and they need a favor from somebody, they're more likely to have a better outcome from asking for that favor, right? If you're, Maz, we haven't spoken for 4 years, but I need a job and I saw you connected to Chris. No, I probably wouldn't respond if I was you either. But, let's say hypothetically someone said, hey, Maz, this podcast is awesome that you started, obviously. And, in 6 months from now, they kept in touch. How are you? How are you getting on? Yeah, good. 6 months from now, oh, I saw you did a podcast with Chris and, he saw that he's hiring. You're probably more inclined to then maybe help that person out because they've made an effort with you over time. Would that be fair to say?
you're asking me? I mean, yeah, I mean, I keep in touch with everybody. I mean, I'm a little bit of an oddball that way. So if I worked with you 4 years ago and haven't spoken to you, I'm not going to not talk to you now just because it's been 4 years.
Right.
That being said, again, it's the ask. I'm more than happy to help with 10-15 minutes of my time for some advice. But it's a very different ask than asking me to make a referral where I'm now putting my reputation on the line saying he's good, right? Because
Right.
they're the level of professionalism there. That's all I was saying. And my secondary point was, again, as a job seeker, how much value is there in that, right? To put that much effort into a single application. That was my only point. Again, if there was an interview there, that's a completely different story, right? I want all the information I can get. But otherwise, yeah.
I think what
Chris.
Kara's saying though, I think he's saying is put your the time that you spend in building those relationships, like, and farming your network and kind of cultivating the human relationships is a way better use of time than like trying to automatically apply to 20 different jobs. I think that's the takeaway, because I identified with several things that you were saying before about, like, am I gonna jump to help somebody who I haven't talked to in 5 or 6 years because all of a sudden they're in a problem? It's like well, it may not be my number one need to do that, but if you're a job seeker in this industry right now, your time is better spent in building the relationships in the community and trying to have those conversations with people who have more experience than you or have a different perspective than you than it is on simply just trying to apply to 100 jobs per day.
That was the more eloquent way of putting what I was trying to say, Chris. So thanks for the assist. But exactly my point. Chris, curious, before you got the job at Jostens, I guess, did you apply for it? Were you headhunted for it? Were you recommended by someone else that you'd worked for prior? How did you get hired?
I got this job through a recruiter, believe it or not. It hasn't happened too often in my career, but this company was looking for um, someone to take on the responsibilities of the team and the org and the existing team. No one was wanting to kind of step into the management layer. They had a really strong solution architect, and so I happen to fit the bill. So I was able to check off the fact that I have been placed by a recruiter in my career, and I think that may be one of the only times that that's happened.
Good. I think it's like your investments, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You're not going to put it all into property. You're not going to put all your money into stocks. You're not going to put all your money in gold, right? You're going to spread it around. And I think for the job search, you have to do the same, right? It's networking locally at events and meetups. There's a ton of user groups. There's networking on LinkedIn. There's networking with recruiters. There's a little bit of applying to jobs directly, and maybe trying to leverage because you got industry experience. Maybe that might give you the edge, right? Maybe you're local. That might give you the edge. So I think it's the same way as same mindset you'd approach investing your money as you invest your time. And maybe Maz, that's something you could agree a bit more with.
Well, yeah, look, you're always going to have a better success with people than strangers or just back in the day we used to think applying to jobs with like throwing your resume into the void. It's like literally how you would describe it, and it's going to get worse now with the AI. Um, they now have like AI application bots.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add to your list. Coworkers is probably your best networking, particularly in Salesforce. So if you're with an SI, you're meeting your clients, you should be maintaining those relationships. And when your coworkers leave to other firms, to competitors, you should be maintaining those. I would say that's probably the number one source of hires. Chris, how about you? How is that something you'd like? How often, or if I'm hiring, that's literally the first thing I do. I go to my team. Who else do you know? Referral bonuses huge in business. Um, do you start with that too, or how does that fall into your?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's to start with the team. Do you know anyone? And given the makeup of the team, at least for this particular role, I knew that was not going to give me too many options. Then go from there. It's kind of like tree rings. Go further and further outside your circle of immediate trust to trusted colleagues, and then like then other executives or leaders, and then finally you've got recruiters, of course, who are always willing to help you. But yeah, starting in that approach is great.
Good. I think before we move on to next question, Chris, there's something around resumes you mentioned, right? And Mazzy covered as well. I think it's really important to add. We see a lot of resumes that essentially look like a job description copy and paste, right? Develop Lightning Web Components, Apex triggers, right? The usual stuff, customized page layouts, right? Like people, if they're hiring an admin or they're hiring a developer, what an admin or a developer do. I think the emphasis on what your value you're bringing to that opportunity or in that role over that period of time. From experience, I think there's three things a hiring manager probably cares about more than not, right? How much money will your role help them generate in revenue? How much money will your role help the business save? And then probably how much time will your role help free up for different business units? So we see a lot of like resumes where it's, decrease the time spent doing XYZ, but no like specific number metrics saved X on third-party application integrations with Salesforce, but no specific mentions of numbers, savings, costs, time. Managed a team. There's a difference between managing a team of one person and 500, right? Like, so being as specific as possible. Was that something you were referring to earlier when you talk about kind of generic resumes?
Oh yes, I mean and that problem also exists at the management layer as well. I thought I'd seen it all until recently reviewing some manager resumes, and it's like managed a team, coordinated UAT processes, and just like what's the accomplishment? How do you quantify it? I would say it is great to be able to put dollars and cents to things, but sometimes depending on the level or just what the change is, it can be very difficult. But I think what hiring managers are looking for is they're not looking for a preciseness like like at the NASA scale. Like we're not trying to land a shuttle on the moon or anything like that. So a rough estimate, and then whatever metrics that you put or you disclose, you should be prepared to talk about those in an educated manner. Like you shouldn't be. If you were asked, if you said that you saved 40% of time on your deployment time, well, you should be able to say, well, okay, how did we do that? Well, we stopped running all, we stopped running all Apex tests for every code deployment. Instead, we're, just running the tests that are applicable for the code that was changed, and that immediately cut it down. It's like, well, okay, that is a reason why, so you're able to explain why you have those metrics that are listed on your resume in that manner.
Perfect. So, so what would be your advice, Chris, having done this a couple of times now, managing decent sized teams, a lot of hiring, what would be your advice to other leaders around building a Salesforce team with minimal turnover and ultimately keeping resources happy, progression, and things like that?
Well, it's something that I'm continually trying to figure out. I think it's kind of like it's like if I was to use my favorite thing, food, it would be if you've ever used a crock pot. A crock pot is like this thing that gradually warms up a soup or a casserole of something, and usually you're putting in multiple different types of ingredients. No one ingredient shines. And so from a management structure, you're looking at reward, acknowledgement. Can you as a manager recognize the amount of effort that went into a piece of work, whether it was delivering it, analyzing the issue. Sometimes it's just having the patience to coordinate with another team or coordinate with some individuals who are testing things out. So there's the acknowledgement side of things. There is recognizing the strengths of your individuals. Like what are the things that that each individual is really good at? Like what do you know that they can shine in? And you don't always have control to give them every type of project or need or request that's going to play to those strengths, but you do have some. And so those few cards that you do have, you need to play them. So the individual who's expressed all of the interest in AI will then give them if you have a couple spare cycles, give them a couple apps, AI apps to go evaluate and come back and report on that. You've got someone who's a data professional or just does all of your data manipulation. Well, then have them explore, what third-party data management apps are out there that can solve the main needs of the organization. Because we all know there's dozens of apps out there, but what are the ones that we as a team or as an organization experience and all the pain points and all of that? So I do try and take that effect or take that approach with management. Is kind of like aligning. You always have a little bit of fungible time throughout the year to kind of align those exploratory projects to exploit people's needs or strengths. And finally, I'd say it's the honest check-in. It's having it's not sometimes having great fun conversations all the time, but recognizing that like this issue or whatever was not handled well or could have been handled better. What are the different ways that you can put in place to avoid that? I think that that's always like the best position to have, is kind of like, what happened and it sucks, but I am here to prevent this from happening again. So how can we do that? And getting that, you get that kind of buy-in with the other person, where it's not this like management individual contributor, but you're kind of like both working towards a common goal, which is not cause the problem again. And then you can recognize the growth the next time that situation may occur, and it can turn into a situation where you're giving them praise in public about how they handled something.
So how much do you think of, I mean, obviously maintaining talent is a big topic. Sometimes you just can't. Do you have like a sweet spot of what's good tenure for a team member? Um, right, at some point you got to promote them, or they are just outgrew their position and maybe you don't have that spot. So one, like how do you handle that? Um, and then the second part is how do you how do you deal with team gel? Team gel is probably, in my opinion, one of the most undervalued thing, or it's not something that's generally I would say, like, they don't really it's not something that's like in on a manager's like to-do list or to look at, right? But how well the team works together is just super, super important. And I think the culture and how well the team gels, combined with, again, knowing that maybe I have a future here or maybe not, or what's my next step, they will kind of all tie together. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. All right. So that was two parts. As far as maintaining
Yeah.
the team and the tenure and all of that, I don't know if there's like a hard and fast rule about like how many years someone has, gotten to a point. People are not like growing ripe on the vine, so to speak. Now they may be getting bored, and I think as a manager, that's your duty, is to find ways to continually challenge them. And in this current era of AI tools being, there's a plethora of them and they don't cost a lot, and you can get a lot of insights out of them. It doesn't take a lot of work to be able to start to spin up some ideas and some new approaches. So that to me is how you keep team members, is by constantly finding new things that grow them professionally or teach them skills. And I will have the honest conversation where I'm like, look, if this is a skill that you have, and whether you're at this company next year at the same time or not, it's listed on your resume. And I kind of try and take that approach of being just a human and wanting the best from them. But right now, the best is like really what the organization needs and what the team needs. But that may change in the future, and that individual has to manage their own, like, what's best for them. To the question about getting teams to work well together, that's a great one. I don't think I've cracked that one, especially in the remote world, because my default, I found myself thinking of how I respond to that great question, and I was like going back to, well, it starts with like breaking bread together, and an old CIO taught me that technique, which is not something that's going to blow your mind, but yeah, gathering everybody and before a large initiative starts, to have a meal together, whether it's lunch or dinner or happy hour or anything like that, and get to know each other outside of the workshop or work or anything like that, really goes far. But I haven't had that luxury in the remote world, at least for the last couple years. So in that, sometimes it starts with creating little team committees, depending on the team size. You're pairing up individuals who perform the same job or are in similar roles so that they can collaborate and maybe they're working on an initiative together. So like it's very common for developers to do peer code reviews, but on the admin side, there's the same thing exists. Like we can have peer code reviews, flow code reviews, and we've established that kind of process at my current organization. It helps to kind of break down the barriers between the team because they're all learning, they're all participating. Even though one person may have authored the automation, they're all benefiting from like the group discussion, and it can be about flow code review. Sometimes it's about just technical debt. Sometimes it's about some other topic altogether. But those are a couple techniques I think that I've used to kind of establish how people can work well together. It's not perfect, and I'm still learning.
What about just to go back to kind of tenure, Chris? I think most would agree that, you know, less than 1 year job hopping is probably not a good thing. But equally, being a Salesforce admin for 10 years might also not be a great thing, right? Salesforce is used so differently depending on the size of the org, how new or old they've been with Salesforce, right? There's so much more you can pick up than sticking in one use case on how one company uses Salesforce for 10 years. At what point do you think, like, okay, let's say more so for maybe someone who's not the finished article, right? Everyone can learn, but let's say not a senior hire in this scenario, in this question, but more so for like a junior mid-level, what would you say, in your opinion, you took a chance on someone, you know, they know a little bit of Salesforce, a couple of years experience. At what point would you think, you know what, fair enough, you've kind of rewarded the faith I put in you, you've worked hard, and I'm not bitter that you're moving on to seek a new job, right? You got a number of years you'd expect in terms of service payback, you know, for that.
I'm trying to assess what your intention of that question is. Not to answer you with a question, but I feel like the answer, that is one of those questions where like 50% of the people are going to be pissed off at the answer, and the other 50% are going to be nodding yes or you know in agreement. So it's a tough one. I'd say the times that I have not been bothered by someone leaving, because at the end of the day, for me personally, I'm always a little bit bothered, because I do feel like it's my remit, my mandate to kind of assemble the team, keep them motivated towards a common goal. And when someone leaves, it's you know, it sometimes feels like a breakdown in communication. Like I missed some sign, or I missed some potential conversation that I could have had, and that would have saved it. But I think the ones that I regret the most are the ones that really blindsided me, where it was like, oh, I didn't know you were interested in that. I didn't know that these things frustrated you in such a manner. And that can come in different forms. Sometimes it's been literally things way outside of my control, you know, like organizational structures, like you know, there's the benefits plan, you know, is much more friendlier to working parents somewhere else. Well, that's fine. That's nothing I can do about that. But still, I kind of internalize that and say, you know, was there an opportunity for me to check in with this individual, and you know, and maybe there was more accommodations I can make. So it's, to me, the ones that I'm never that bothered by are the ones where I do feel like, all right, I've had the kind of fun and the not so fun conversations about where they're going, and am I satisfied with the effort that I put in to retain them? And if I'm not, then am I okay with them leaving, or do I regret it?
Maz, you're on mute.
You make a great point there. I think a lot of people aren't proactive enough in communicating where they want to take their career with their boss, with their managers. I think there's maybe it's taboo or misconception, or maybe even a real conception that it could be viewed at as you're not happy when you're saying, I want to, get to a point where I can do XYZ, or, get promoted to this role or make more money, or right, advance my skills in such a way. Um, so a lot of people just won't talk about it, and then they'll just up and go, and you're caught off guard. Um, so I think that's a big part of it. What's your thoughts on that? Do you feel it's your job to coax them to get that information out and make them feel safe?
What I have learned is that the corporate world doesn't set you up for those kinds of productive relationships. And by that, I mean, you've got in any given kind of corporate role, there's usually some kind of annual or quarterly goal setting. And then you set those goals. And then more often than not, the manager will meet with that individual no more than the corporately required time, which means usually maybe once. So maybe that's a mid-year, or maybe that's an end of quarter type of thing. And then what that does is that leaves a ton of room for stagnation, for progress to not occur, or for things to experiences to accumulate where you're not sharing feedback. So, what I've done in the past couple of years is turn it into a more frequent conversation. So we have one-on-ones with all my team, and we meet like every other week for a dedicated one-on-one, and we also meet every day for a daily stand-up. So there's a lot of chatting, a lot of talking, and all of that. But every 2 months, we actually have a recurring meeting, and it's like we're just going to talk these goals and objectives. And sometimes that meeting is me and the individual, and there's no talking. I'm just like, give me 5 or 10 minutes for me to write down a bunch of things that you have done according to these, and then we'll discuss them. Because maybe I lose track and didn't have time to kind of keep that up, and maybe it's for the individual to ask questions of me, and that has paid way more dividends for me as far as like team engagement. It's also made the end of year and mid year process like way less painful because you've met way more frequently. So there's less room for surprise in that manner.
I think what you're talking about is like OKRs. You'll have your people like put together their like key goals that they want to accomplish in the next quarter, sometimes personal even. That's what you're talking about. Anecdote, the best one I've ever had, I was mentoring someone, this was quite some time ago. Um, and I found out he was very good, BA. I found that he dropped out of college, and I told him, okay, put down as a goal to complete your degree. And he left the company, but then like 2 years later, he told me, yeah, he finally finished. I was surprised. Really, really cool. So taking that a step further, and this is something that's actually really good in the Salesforce community, but not necessarily out in the wider um, corporate world, which is training, particularly junior level people training. There's a fear of investing a lot of money into a relatively junior employee, then they're going to take those skills and then leave just when they're becoming productive, or just when you would say getting a return on that investment, let's say. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Not necessarily in if it's a good idea or bad idea, but in terms of mitigating that risk to make sure you get right some level of return on that.
Hmm. I don't know if I've ever looked at it and used that kind of terminology around getting my return of that. I do associate with the investing in people, and I can't admit to being frustrated when I feel like that maybe investment has walked out the door. But I think I don't know if I would change my answer. It comes back to how, like, do you feel as a hiring manager that you did the best to lay out this individual's like a career path that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So that's what I'm saying. In your best, the power that you have, you cannot control all aspects, and maybe that project didn't get funded, or maybe that maybe that executive left, and so that big initiative that you had queued up for that individual is just completely toast. So it's oftentimes the self-reflection on the manager that I feel needs to happen, and I don't feel like that does. Like, what would you do differently? I've had during 2022 or 2021. That was an era that, Caro, you probably know, as what was it called? The Great Resignation. Like,
Yep.
I had the sports analogy, rebuilding year. 80 or 90, 80, between 80 and 90% of the team resigned. And it was, and man, and when it was the first resignation, I was kind of like, all right, I'm sorry to see you go. But by the eighth or the ninth, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing here? And it was very hard on me because I felt like I'm doing all the right things. And so I had to have that conversation. I couldn't, there was a lot of things going on in the market outside of my control with salaries and and crazy hiring. But I look back at that time and say, I don't know if I was really having a lot of great conversations with the team at that time about where they wanted to go, and like how could I play to their strengths. I felt like if I was to be more critical, I was a little bit more autopilot manager. Like, well, here's the work, and this is your duty to do the work. I mean, that's part of it, but to me, the great managers or the great leaders are the ones that can say, "Do you understand the value behind this work? Like, can we improve this so that it's not so crappy to do next year or next time next someone else has to do this?" Like those types of things, those types of approaches, in my experience, just flip the thinking of the person on the other side, where it's like, oh, there's actually like they actually care about me as a human or about how this gets done. And people, I find people to increase their loyalty significantly when you show that there's that kind of level of care, and it's not this just how much value can I get out of you? How many flows can you crank out? How many deployments can you get? Or how many lines of code can you write?
Yeah, that is true. All right, I'm gonna pivot back to the other question. So I just want to clarify my previous question. When I was talking about return on investment, I'm talking about you made a real investment in this employee, not, hey, read these books on your downtime type of
Mm-hmm.
investment. I'm talking I hire someone and I'm putting them under a senior level person to shadow them for 3 months, where they're going to have literally almost no productivity, except that they're building them to become like a real expert in something. Or I'm sending them for a 3-week training course right out somewhere where you got to put them in a hotel and pay for the course, and you're losing, you're paying them for those 3 weeks, or that the kind of investment that used to be really, really common in this country. And again, it's still somewhat common in the Salesforce space, much more than the general corporate world. Doctors now, they're required to go to conferences. That's the kind of thing, that I'm talking about when I'm talking about investing in people, where it's like you're literally taking someone, they don't have a skill set. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to literally get them trained up and then moved into a role.
So, tell me then your question. Then thanks for that clarification. Were you kind of asking how do you
Yeah,
handle that
I mean,
situation?
if it's not something you've done, that's fine too, right? Again, it's not super common nowadays, but again, I think one of the reasons that it became not common, and I think it's one of the greatest thing that used to be part of part of the corporate culture in this country, was that level of training. But one of the reasons that it diminished was because of the, let's call it, the job hopping culture, right? And again, it's because, what am I doing? I'm going to invest in someone Right. So, for example, a junior salesperson, like nobody's hiring someone with no sales experience to become a salesperson because it takes 2 years of training. So, not going to do it is basically what happened. So that's the kind of investment that I was kind of talking about. If you would make those kind of investments, and maybe how we can bring that back, if that's a better question.
Hmm.
I know it's
I
hard
have it.
questions, but
Yeah, well, I have experienced that. I don't have a way yet to completely like eliminate that. I mean, people are going to make their own decisions, but I do think it's. I would probably approach it a little bit about like how I approach IT projects. Which when we do an IT project, we always the one thing that's always certain is we're always going to do a retro, and a retro consists of three simple questions of like, what do you want to stop doing? What do you want to start doing? What would you keep doing? And so you reframe those into like, because I think what you're saying is that person has made that decision. So it really is, I think, too late at a certain point. Like you're not gonna, I don't think that there's a lot of value in trying to convince someone like who has clearly made up their mind. I think you should present the facts as far as the opportunities that are available to them, and then I would also then have that kind of difficult conversation where you're asking them for feedback on you as a leader. You're asking them for uh, feedback on how do they want to be perceived in the industry and how do they think this role will help them. And I think that from there, you may not get an answer that you're going to be satisfied with, but you're going to get some nugget of wisdom that's going to make you smarter the next time that goes around. And that's to me like the whole purpose of the project retros and those kind of situations is what certain things are going to happen, and it's your job as a leader to figure out, all right, what do I need to do differently so that I minimize the chances of that happening again.
A lot there. I feel like that could be a topic in itself, right? I guess again that's where I was trying to go with, at what point do you feel content that your investment was paid off, right? In somebody. Is it 2-3 years? That's fair, because it's a two-way thing, right? It's a two-way street. If you're going to invest in a hire, I would expect them to then invest back into the company, right? And show some degree of loyalty if you've taken a chance on someone or you've helped accelerate them from a junior admin to a solution architect. I mean, surely that's worth something in return. But anyway, last question for you, Chris. Curious if hiring in different industries, if you've noticed any kind of trends from, hiring during working at a real estate company, global business, billion-dollar business with a massive name behind them versus, a manufacturing company that maybe the average person probably wouldn't have heard of. No disrespect intended, but JLL, Jostens. If you walked on the street, I think more people would have heard of JLL, right? So, did that make your life easier as a hiring manager? Especially when it comes to hiring Salesforce, and you've kind of hired people in a market where talent was highly sought after, and then again when perhaps it wasn't in both roles. So did you feel like having the heavyweight pedigree name behind you of a JLL made your life hiring easier, is the question?
No, I don't think it did. I think it kind of got all like in the technology roles that are applying. There's like it feels like that more than half the people are applying and they don't have that specific industry experience. So you're always going to prioritize people like with that who look good on paper to kind of tie it back to what we said earlier. You're gonna prioritize those people, but beyond that, to me, I'm looking at like how do they position their resume? How are they aware of their accomplishments? And I say accomplishments, not tasks, because anyone can list out tasks. Every admin performs the same damn tasks as any other admin in this industry. It doesn't matter whether you have 5 users or 10,000 users. Like you all perform the same thing: assigning permission sets, creating custom fields, like all of that sort of stuff. So it's, to me, it's how are they positioning their accomplishments, and then if it does get into an interview, it's the insightful questions. That's the differentiator, because I'll ask a couple different scenario based questions, and usually, people more often than not, do okay at those, because it's usually like describing something that they have listed on their resume or a particular project. But then when you open it up for questions, you can tell very quickly, like, who has done their homework, who is maybe more interested, who's more in tune with the current challenges of the market, the industry, the the world itself, that type of thing.
So I the takeaways I take from this episode in general: 2 things you value really highly, outside the obvious technical skill set, is effort and preparation.
Definitely. I think there's nothing more frustrating than getting on a call with someone who hasn't demonstrated a lot of effort or enthusiasm or even interest, and then the people who take no energy or effort to apply, is kind of like, oh, you get what you put in. You get what you put in, and you're going to get the same from me.
Agreed. Well, okay, listeners, that's a wrap for today's episode. So, Chris, we'd just like to thank you for sharing your insights, experiences with us today. And obviously, we covered a lot of emphasis on hiring. So, thanks for your time, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. And then for our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Chris. You can follow us on LinkedIn for more exclusive insights, including rapid rounds and episode teasers before the episodes go live.